1. I was just entering high school. My parents were on the strict side. I was only allowed to go to parties of mixed gender if my parents knew the host parents, and knew they would be present. So this was one of the first parties I'd been to as a teenager with females present. I had just got my first cell phone, and I was excited to potentially get some numbers. Wasn't destined to be, I was and still am a goofy, awkward kid. Climbing out of the passenger seat, my dad yelled, "Keep your phone on you when the party's over," as he dropped me off. Oddly enough, my phone rang immediately. In my excitement, I ignored it and ran inside to meet up with my friend Miles. I handed him my gift and we headed out back to play football. The next couple hours were fairly uneventful as far as parties go. After it got dark, Miles' parents called everyone inside. Most of us had a 12 o'clock curfew, so we decided to pop in a movie before calling our rides. Batman Begins was a hot movie that a lot of us still hadn't seen. I wasn't allowed to see PG-13 movies before 13, and simply hadn't gotten around to it yet. As the movie was starting, I pulled out my phone with the intention of getting the number of a cute blonde I was talking to. That is, until I saw I had a voicemail. Instinctively, I knew something was off. I had very few numbers still. New phone, remember? The only contact I had in that phone was with my parents. And maybe 2 friends. Obviously, their numbers were all saved. My screen told me the voicemail was from a number I didn't recognize. However, party mentality is a good distraction. I quickly forgot about the text and my attention shot back to the movie. And to the blonde. The movie didn't last long. After the first couple scenes, the disc froze. Miles' dad determined the scratches rendered the disc unplayable and sent us on an adventure to the attic to find a replacement movie. After a few minutes digging around and having inappropriate movies vetoed by parents, we came across an old movie called Signs. Technically, it's only 3 years older than Batman Begins. My buddy's mom kinda dismissed the movie as creepy and not very good. I've always been attracted to creepy stuff, haunted houses, Halloween, and, soon to find out, scary movies. So I went out of my way to sway everyone's movie vote to Signs. A couple quick texts to the scary movie-averse parents, and we popped it in. Signs, for those of you who don't know, is an M. Night Shyamalan film about aliens that come to Earth. Good film, I'd recommend it if you like suspense. But not what I'd consider scary anymore. For the sake of not spoiling the movie, I'll just share a bit of information for you to understand the terrifying, bizarre tale that was unfolding. In one scene, Mel Gibson's son discovers that their baby monitor is picking up another frequency. All you can hear is some clicking and chirping interspersed by static and feedback. They finally stumbled across an alien conversation. Then the signal dies. You can find the scene on YouTube if you just search Mel Gibson baby monitor. My spine tingled the entire 2 minutes upon rewatching it. Back to the party. Movie ends and things wind down. Somehow I end up being the last person lingering. My social graces have always been pretty good. I saw that the night had come to an end, so I saw myself outside to the curb to await my ride. The house was about 30 yards from the street, and large private properties led to fairly sparse lighting on the street. I figured I had some privacy, so my thoughts turned back to the voicemail. At first, I was a bit annoyed. There was about a minute of nothing, no sound whatsoever. Then I start to pick out something at the edge of my hearing. It sounded like clicking. The hair on my arms slowly began to rise. Then, among the static, a few high-pitched chirps. At one point I slammed my phone shut, and I've got chills all over my body. I'm looking around like a maniac. Who sent this? What the bloody hell is happening? I darted back to the front porch. I know that Miles' little brother was already in bed, so I hesitated to knock. Dude, you're freaking out over nothing, I tell myself. Call the number back, it's probably a joke. But that's not right, is it? I got the call hours ago. Miles is the only person who had my number. And he had never even seen Signs. But I returned the call anyway. 3-tone dial sounds. We're sorry you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number and try your call again. I'm frantic now. I punch in the number manually. "We're sorry, you have..." Click. The line goes dead. I dialed again, faster than I could think. Nothing but a dead line tone. At this point, I was on the verge of tears and about to slam on the door, but my dad pulled up. Inexplicably, I don't think I've ever told him what happened. I think I just mumbled something about not getting that girl's number as a diversion for my silence. I saved that voicemail for years. I wanted some kind of proof that I didn't imagine the whole thing. I finally lost the message when I got my first iPhone. To this day, I hate getting a disconnected number message. It creeps me out more than I care to admit. 2. Before we start, in reference to the movie The Matrix, the Oracle tells Keanu Reeves what will really make you wonder later if you would have broken the jar, vase, pot, was if she hadn't said anything, would he still have broken it? That part sticks out more to me than the event itself. Little backstory. I'm from the middle of nowhere, in the Midwest, and grew up racing dirt bikes my entire life on tracks through the timber. We call them hare scrambles. By no means a pro, but faster than my friends and usually first or second at the local MX track. Well, when I started getting serious about practicing, I cut myself a little trail through the timber on our land. I was about 11 or 12 years old. Well, one day I see someone else riding, and they had a bandana hanging from the right handlebar, which I thought looked cool. He was on a bigger bike, and I chased him through the timber, trying to catch him, telling him he was on our land. There's pretty much no way you could get on our land without us or the neighbors noticing. Anyway, this guy was fast and stayed ahead of me the entire time, to where I could only see glimpses of him as I'm chasing him. Then he disappeared at the point where the trail turns back on itself. I never saw him again. But I remembered the bandana hanging from the handlebar, and did that to my bike. Turns out it was really helpful when you get mud on your gloves when riding. You can clean your hands and use it to wipe the grip off, so I kept doing it. Fast forward about 15 years. I had quit riding motocross and dirt bikes altogether, because I had joined the Navy and was gone for 6 years. I get back home and get settled in. One day the neighbor's son is riding bikes and got me interested in riding again. So I look into getting a bike. Well, I finally get one and I'm riding for a few months, and then decide to go see if there's any remnants of the old trail markers I had cut and set. I was slightly surprised how well the trail was maintained. So pick up the speed a little bit. Keep in mind, I did tie a bandana to the handlebars, cause that's my signature move. Well, I hear another bike behind me and take a look. Didn't recognize the person, but it was a blue dirt bike. Exactly like the one I had when I was a kid, and just thought, okay, this kid found my trail and that's why it was maintained. So I crank it to 11 and I'm hitting this trail as fast as I can. And this little stranger is right behind me. I'm on a bigger bike than he was, so I pull away a little bit in the straight parts and finally hit the point where it turns around. It goes around a huge tree and then the trail quite literally disappeared. As in, tall grass, no tire marks, nobody following me. And there's timber blocking big parts of the old trail. I was super confused. It wasn't until I got back that I noticed, with a major epiphany, of what happened. Still getting chills thinking about it. I had seen my future self on a motorcycle whose prototype bike wasn't even out yet. And the weirdest part to understand was the bandana. Nobody else I know ties a bandana to their bike. I saw it when I was 11 and thought it looked cool. But only did it so my alleged future self did it. So when did the idea actually form in my mind? Still have a hard time wrapping myself around it. 3. There have been a few instances throughout my life in which objects that are dropped or thrown or something of the like just suddenly disappear. The most notable 3 I can remember are: 1. At age 8, throwing a rubber ball under my table and looking, and there was nothing there. Nowhere for it to roll, nothing. Never found it again. Even when I moved out at 17, never showed up again. 2. Dropping a pencil in a college gym around age 16, and bending over to pick it up, and it was gone. Nobody around me could have picked it up. There was nothing for it to roll under. 3. The most distinct and bizarre one. Around age 8 or 9, 10 max. Albertson's checkout line with my mom. Dad was in the car waiting for us. Mom pulls out debit card to pay. Card slips out of her hand and falls on the ground. Heard it clatter, and I watched exactly where it hit the ground. Then bounced forward. The only thing it could bounce forward towards was a conveyor base that is sealed into the ground, with no spaces for things to fall under. We both looked all over the floor and it just up and disappeared. Told my dad so he could come in and bring his card. And he didn't understand, but was angry because we lived in an area that was pretty ghetto. Honestly, so anyone would assume it was stolen. And it was a joint account, so he was frantic about cancelling the cards. Anyways, I kept looking since I was small and could crawl around easily to search. Nobody in line was near us enough to snatch it without us seeing. Ended up leaving the store being very confused, because I literally watched it fall, hit the ground, bounce forward, and it couldn't go farther than an inch forward at most anyways without hitting the conveyor base, then seemingly vanish from existence. From the third incident, fast forward 8 or so years until the time of incident number 2. Told my dad when I got home about the pencil disappearing. He's usually closed-minded about anything defying logic, saying there's always a logical explanation. But on this particular occasion, he says something that surprises me. Wormhole. I'm very confused at this point, so I ask him what he means. Keep in mind I'm in my 20s now, so I don't remember the details, but the gist of it was something about Einstein, or another famous person in those subjects, having a theory about wormholes randomly appearing and disappearing. Kinda like Donnie Darko. My dad said with total confidence that it must have fallen into a wormhole. No idea what really happened, but it's the best theory I have. Anyone else experience this kind of stuff? Any different theories? 4. So this happened almost a year ago, and I still haven't been able to forget this because of how memorable and eerie it was. So basically I had 2 dreams in a row that day, which sometimes happens to me when someone may wake me up for a moment or two in the midst of sleeping, which I suspect was also the case that night. This is how I remember them to the best of my memory. In the first one, I was a sailor in the early 19th century England, and was part of some crew on a ship that was probably a frigate. I was about to depart on some voyage which was to go somewhere in the west along the Atlantic, after visiting the European continent to visit my parents. There was some news in my local town about some monster sighting in the ocean, and people were scared and frantic about it, and weren't letting their loved ones go on that voyage. But I and a few others dismissed this as some made-up rumor and rejoined our crew anyway. A few hours after departing from the coast, our ship was attacked from beneath the deck, and was torn in two by a giant tentacle of the monster. There was an entire armada of ships of the same company along with our own, which were also destroyed, and then there was an island nearby which I, along with most of my other crew, were trying to reach by swimming towards it. Unfortunately, most of the people died, and I was one of the last ones to try to scale the distance between the wreckage and the island. But while swimming, I was pulled downwards by some part of the wreckage, and I came face to face with the monster, who was pretty humongous in appearance, and in fact so big that even though its face was at least 3 to 4 miles away from me, I could still not fit its entire torso in the scope of my eye's vision. His eyes were glowing red, and at least a mile apart from each other, and his face had snake-like tentacles attached at the ends, like they were his mane. His face kinda looked like Davy Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean series, but more animalistic, without a mouth, and had a bluish-green color to it. He was so large he was probably standing on the ocean bed, and yet his head was almost touching the sea level, and had his arms been spread apart, they would probably touch continents. At this point, while I kept staring into his eyes, the dream ended. In the second dream, I was part of some tribe in South Asia, living on an island which was separated by a landmass. Probably the Sentinelese. There were 2 villages coexisting on that island, and everything was peaceful between them. I was the son of some high-ranking official on one of the villages, and was of marriageable age. While fishing one day, I came across a girl who had been washed ashore and wasn't conscious. She was exotic in appearance. After reviving her, the villagers decided to let her stay on the island. I used to meet her daily, and slowly we fell in love with each other. But my family and the villagers were against our union, claiming that there was something evil about the girl. Still, we eloped together and relocated to the other village. After some time, a civil war started between two villages, because of the other one harboring us. They fought and later made peace on the grounds that we shouldn't be allowed to stay in either village. We weren't ready to leave, so they gave us the ultimatum that either my wife should leave the island, or we both would be forced off it. I didn't agree, but suddenly my wife disappeared overnight. I slowly settled back into my own village and old life, thinking that she had returned to her own family. A few months later, when preparations were going on for my own marriage, my wife returned and was pregnant this time, claiming it to be mine. But still angry from the last time when she left me, I rejected her, telling her to go back to her own place. She became angry and transformed into a giant monster, who resembled the monster from my first dream. Tentacles extended from her body which grabbed and killed every living being around me, destroying 90% of the island's population. After the destruction was over, I looked at the monster and questioned her as to why she had done it. She talked to me telepathically in an alien language I didn't understand, and then disappeared again, vanishing into thin air, and with that, the dream ended. I woke up sweating in my bed, still trying to grasp as to what the fuck I had just witnessed in my dreams. At the time when this occurred, I had a tendency to look up meanings of my dreams online, because I believe that our dreams, if interpreted correctly, may give an insight into our own psychology and our fears and unsurfaced ambitions. I googled something along the lines of ocean monster dream. A picture popped up as if it was just waiting for me. It's exactly what my first dream looked like. The monster, the sky, even the ship. The atmosphere echoed by it made me remember my dream even more strongly. I looked up the monster and found that it was called Cthulhu, appearing in H.P. Lovecraft's works. While I did own a book of his a long time ago, I never bothered reading it. This was the first time I was reading about his works and learning more about the mythos he created. I watched a video on Cthulhu mythos on YouTube, and here's a part about his story that really worried me. He is apparently a god from some other dimension who appears in the dreams of mortals to manipulate them or influence them to do his bidding. Got scared shitless and decided to never read any H.P. Lovecraft book from then. Maybe I am simply overreacting, but getting to know that a monster who I knew nothing about, and probably hadn't seen before, literally appeared in 2 dreams of mine in different forms, is actually supposed to play with dreams according to his stories, did scare the living hell out of me. More importantly, I couldn't really fathom as to why these dreams were so deep and detailed, because normally my scary dreams are about shallow, mundane stuff like killer clowns, ghosts, and falling off ledges. Had trouble sleeping a few nights after this incident, but that was all the creepiness that was to it. 5. When I was around 16, my best friend and I went to my parents' weekend getaway place. I had been going there almost every weekend during the summer since I was 12. It's basically a trailer park with RVs. You own your lot and only pay a yearly fee for electric and water, etc. It's on a nice little private lake. I had never gone outside the park before, but we did that weekend. A fellow camper there that I was friends with and his half-sister had been out there a couple times and knew the general layout of the neighborhood, so we went for a walk. It seemed pretty normal at first. We took a right out of the campground and then the first left. We then took a second right. It was only 2 short blocks. We walked to the end of that road and took another right. And at the end of that road, after passing one street, we took another right onto the road that we started on. Basically a big rectangle. The whole walk at the time we were taking the last turn onto the original street was about 20 minutes. And it should have only taken another 10 minutes max to get back to our starting point. Well, we walked that street for a good half hour, 45 minutes, and never got to our starting point. We gave it a little longer and, realizing it had been way too long, but after seeing no sign of our campground, we started to worry that we had turned on the wrong street, and not having GPS on our phones, we decided the best thing to do would be to turn back and go back the way we came. It only took us about 5 minutes to get back to where we turned onto the last street, and a total of about 20 minutes to get back to where we started. We were walking a little faster because we were freaked out, but not fast enough to explain why we travelled 45 minutes down the road, but it only took us 5 minutes to get back to the turn we needed to make. There were no other streets to turn on, so we knew this was the right one. Once we made it back to our original spot by the campground, we were too freaked out to do anything else and just went back to my friend's campsite. The next day we decided to go down the road we should have come out on to see if it looked like the street we had been on. It did. There were specific houses and landscaping we had pointed out the night before, and they were all there. But it also felt like there was something missing, but we couldn't remember anything specific. And it took us less than 10 minutes to walk the whole stretch of that road, about 25 minutes to complete the whole rectangle. We walked it both ways, and there really wasn't any other way we could have gone. There is no way we could have walked past our starting point in that road, especially not twice, as there was a street light not far from our starting point, and you can clearly see the campground from the road. We still can't explain it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, episode 81, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Sorry there's been no streams this week. I've just been getting back into the swing of things after my week off. So if I don't do one... Thursday this goes up, so if I don't do one on the Thursday, I'll probably do one on Saturday, because I'll be busy on Friday. Okay, and with that I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.